The Selfish Podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
Are you stuck in fight or flight? Is your life a bit of a shit show? Do you need to prioritise yourself and perhaps be a bit more selfish? Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to our next episode. Hey, Steph.
Hey, Chloe. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you going?
I'm good, thanks. What's on your mind today? What are you going to...
Oh, well, actually, I wanted to share, yesterday, had some really interesting conversations with my mastermind group, coaching group, around tough conversations.
I love tough. Well, I don't like tough conversations, but I really enjoy talking about them.
Yeah. I think we need to maybe change the way we view tough conversations. And that was what this conversation was about. So we had a beautiful energy coach come in, and she's from the States, and she's like, I don't even know exactly what she does, but she just has all these amazing words and thoughts and ideas. And she kind of came to us, to talk about how we need to potentially change the way we view ourselves before we go into tough conversations or tricky conversations, be it with a spouse, a family member, or even, at work. We often have to have difficult conversations with employees or employers, whoever working for or working alongside. And she just had offered some really great thoughts.
Do tell.
So I'm just going back over my...
And so when we're talking about tough conversations, we're also talking about that, holding that uncomfortableness.
Yeah, because I think for us as society, well, this is the first way she talked about it initially. She was like, us as society view difficult conversations as a bad thing. Like we don't know how to hold that discomfort.
Yeah.
And it's a problem. Because, we should be able to have a whole host, like last week how we talked about all different emotions and holding different emotions. Like it's totally normal for us as human beings to have different emotions. But that vulnerability that comes with us sharing honestly and openly those varying emotions that we have, on the other side of that discomfort of sharing with that vulnerability piece comes so much more connection and integration and intimacy if you allow that to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with this. And I think that, I've had to have a number of uncomfortable conversations and feelings over the last few years, and people really, really struggle to hold that discomfort. People struggle when you talk about things that they automatically go into that solving mode.
Yes.
And you say, this has happened. Oh, well, what about this? What about this? You're like, no. I don't need you to. You can't solve this problem.
Or I don't need you to solve it.
And even if you can, well, you can't. And I don't need you to. I'm not telling you because I want you to do something. I'm telling you because I just want you to sit there with me.
Yep.
And just listen and acknowledge.
Yep, 100%. But we as humans find that quite difficult to do. And so it was just really interesting having this really opening conversation with 5 other women and just to be, okay in sitting in that discomfort. And some things that she kind of talked about was that even before you go into a tricky conversation, just thinking about the opportunity that lies before you to be able to, yes, sometimes solve or sometimes not, or just be honest and open about how you're truly feeling, and the growth and evolution for yourself, but also for that communication partner that you're with on the other side of that discomfort is like really astounding. It's pretty cool when you think of it from that perspective. So I was just like, it was really great. So she asked a couple of questions. Like kind of before you go into having a difficult conversation, which I thought I would share. But she kind of said, like, think about like, what are we here for and what are we not here for? So I feel like for me, this comes back to like holding boundaries which some of us, I know I've had to really work on holding boundaries and potentially saying no more. And in doing that, I am then aligning more to my authentic self.
Yep.
And so I was like, I really love those kind of questions, like thinking about even if you're going to have a chat with your partner and you want to talk about something that's going on between you or whatever, like thinking about, what are you here for, but what are you also not here for? And kind of speaking that and being honest about that. I was like, I bloody love that. And then what is your job? What is my job in this conversation? But what is their job? What do they need to hold in this conversation as well? Like thinking about it. So I don't know. I just really like the idea of like pre-planning sometimes these difficult conversations.
I think that's a great idea. And I think it's a good way to do it, because if you just go in at guns blazing, like I think just having a little time to reflect and think about it and not be reactive.
Yes.
And I suppose set that intention for that conversation.
Absolutely.
But also when I've had difficult conversations with people before, I've sort of said to them, this is going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel things and I'm going to feel things, and that's okay.
Yes.
And I think also sometimes, depending on what that conversation is, you can sort of preface, some of it and just go, and that's actually all right if we have a bit of,
It's okay if we don't agree.
Yep. Or if it's okay if our bodies feel a bit funny.
Yeah.
Because it does. I don't know about you. When I feel uncomfortable, I do. I just feel a bit, ugh.
Yeah, where does it feel? Where do you feel it?
For me, it's around my stomach.
Yeah.
Like it's around my stomach and sort of sometimes into my heart space.
Yeah, or that solar plexus, like just below this is for me. I don't know if this is the same for you, but, your tummy's like down further, but then just above your tummy, under your lungs.
Under my lungs, yeah.
Like that solar.
So for those at home or wherever you're listening to this podcast, we have talked about solar plexus a few times. So this is one of the 7 chakras.
Yes.
So I think it would be good to actually talk about chakras in the future. But solar plexus is just between, how did you describe it, Chloe? Just under your ribs?
Under my ribs, yeah. I said lungs, but that's probably, I guess your lungs are under your ribs.
Exactly.
Anatomy 101. Don't ask us.
Yeah, exactly. And so what does the solar plexus normally hold?
Oh, I think it can be different for everyone, but I think it is like an emotional kind of center. Yeah. Yep. And so for me, when I'm feeling uncomfortable, I definitely feel a bit of a swirly-whirly feeling kind of in that space.
Yeah.
But also for me too, can move up into the heart space or even down a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Too.
So we've got our third eye.
Yes.
Throat chakra, our heart chakra, our solar plexus, which is the one that we've just been talking about. Is it?
Yep.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. A sacral chakra, which is sort of between the pelvis.
Yes.
And then the root chakra, which is sort of the very bottom of the spine.
I love all of this because it links into human design a lot. So when you are looking at your body chart on human design, it actually pinpoints all of the chakras, and kind of you can have an open area or a closed area, and it's kind of how you're receptive to the world in those different areas, chakras.
Yeah, and they've all got different colours, because I think the third eye is quite purple, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the solar plexus is yellow, and they're really interesting stuff.
So interesting.
I know that one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was to help open up my throat chakra, which I felt
Likewise.
and I feel like it is opening.
Yep, we're letting it out there. We're letting it out.
We're letting it in. It's
feeling good.
It's feeling good.
It's feeling good. I on that, I just quickly to kind of summarize. We just went a bit of a tangent there, but back to like the difficult conversations. I really liked how you said like to kind of, if you set that intention and you're very like clear about what this conversation is going to be about, that reduces the amount of reactiveness that we have. So, but then she kind of talked about like, if you are reactive, it's okay to also say that. Like, I'm not feeling, I'm feeling like I'm a bit heightened at the moment or a bit triggered. Why don't we take a little break and then come back and have another chat about this, just so that you can establish kind of your goal for the conversation and not get off track.
Yeah, I think how many people do that? How many people are you in a conversation with and they're like, Chloe, can we just hold off a moment because I'm feeling reactive? Like I think that's where we need to be, 100%.
Yeah.
How many people actually do it?
No. I'm going to start to try and do it.
Yeah, and and I think part of it is also understanding your feelings and emotions a little bit more, and being able to name them, but also understand how you respond in situations.
Absolutely. One other thing she said is, which I think we've kind of talked about before too, is she said, your body is the least confused part of yourself. So if you can tap into like, how is my body feeling at this moment? When I'm feeling reactive, where am I feeling in my body? How we're just chatting about where we feel in our solar plexus, and like kind of like creating this somatic screenshot of like what these feelings feel like in our body, and it can give us so much more insight because it's just like it's all within us.
Yeah. As we've been talking, I actually think I feel it higher in my heart as well. Like I do think I feel it really quite, solar plexus, but then almost the uncomfortableness almost creeps.
Yeah, moves and shifts. Yeah. It's so cool to be aware of that though.
Yeah. So then when I name it, I feel much more calm about it.
Yeah. Because you've noticed it and you've accepted it in a way. And you're like, that's okay. It's okay that I'm feeling like that. Yeah. So I was just, yesterday was just really enlightening, and I love where these conversations are going, and that then we're able to share it more broadly here with everyone listening. So I think it's really cool, really cool.
On the topic of discomfort and uncomfortableness, so I've been seeing this psychotherapist who I mentioned, a psychiatrist who specialises in psychotherapy.
Yes.
And it's going really well, and I'll share more in a future podcast, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yes.
But what is really interesting is that I've seen psychiatrists before and psychologists before, and it's much more of a conversation, and like, I say something to you and you react and you respond. Whereas with this therapist, and I believe it's true of the psychotherapy piece, like I walk in and there's no small talk. We're not like, oh, what's the weather doing? It's designed to be a space where, you don't know anything about each other, and you go in and then you can unpack whatever you need to unpack, and you're sort of in this safe space with this person who knows nothing about you. Well, actually they know a lot about you, but you know nothing about them. And boy, oh boy, is it uncomfortable.
I was just going to say how uncomfortable is that when you walk in and is it like there's no talking, or does she like ask you?
It's just not the small talk. Yeah, so there's definitely questions asked.
Okay.
But she really holds that silence and holds that space for me to explore things. But when you're used to sort of talking to someone and they're like, okay. And, I'm
you get with me.
Exactly. I'm a very active listener as our viewers, our listeners. So what do I always call them, viewers?
Well, we might be on YouTube.
Yeah, so. Exactly. As our listeners know, we both are very sort of vocal. But, not having that makes you, it's just uncomfortable. And I said to her, listen, this makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And sort of thinking about the conversations we're going to have makes me very uncomfortable. But it is an opportunity to look at things, to look at situations, to look at responses or feelings, and really examine them with more of a curious mind and work through it with someone else. So I am looking forward to it, but at the same time, I'm shit scared. And it does feel uncomfortable, and that's because it's new, and I think it's a new way of communicating with someone. And I think silence is something that people can be really quite uncomfortable with.
Absolutely, I think that we all feel like even like a second of silence can seem like a really long time.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is, so when I was working in Asia, silence is, so I think Australians and Americans and British, very active listeners, and almost our pattern of speech is to talk over each other, and that's to show understanding. So I'm almost finished, you start talking, whereas in a lot of Asian cultures that is seen as, really quite rude and not listening. So there's a lot of holding silence, and you'll say something, and me thinking and holding silence is me listening and thinking about it, and then I'll have a considered response. And when I was working over there, because it was really hard to start with, just to go, don't say anything, like you don't need to interrupt, like just,
shut up,
exactly. And it looked about how long it takes for people to be uncomfortable in different cultures. And I think with Australia, US, like less than 1 second, people were uncomfortable. Whereas in some of these Asian cultures, it could be like 8 seconds is a comfortable silence. So it is interesting. Just
it's so interesting.
Letting silence hang and seeing.
Do you know just what came in, something that dropped in there? So I'm a speech pathologist, trained speech pathologist as well, and we often talk about with children allowing that waiting time. So if we ask a question, then we should allow time for the child to respond. And often us as parents or adults or the caregivers, we will jump in and answer the question before the child has even had time to even like process it and then think of the words to come out. So it is actually so important that we wait, isn't it? More.
Yeah. And just give that space, because we don't need to always be thinking about, okay, what's happening next? What's going on next? What's
preempting.
Yeah. Preempting responses. And just, I think people sometimes are a little bit scared of, well, what if there's silence, and then what do we do?
But let's allow it. And see what happens on the other side of that. I think you're so right about our responses will be more articulate, because we've allowed our minds to process the question or whatever, or the comment, and then give a response.
Yeah. Having said that, I'm going to talk over you for the rest of the podcast.
That's totally fine. Right. I think let's go back to just being how we are.
But no, it's interesting.
It's so interesting. All right. Shall we move into the week ahead with the moon?
Let's do it.
Beautiful. So wonderful people. We've got a full moon coming up on Sunday, the 4th of June, and it is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a freedom seeker, and the theme of Sag is like, I see, I seek. So this is a really big energy. It might feel a bit restless for us because Saggies are typically larger than life. Love them. We might have a strong desire to broaden our horizons. With the full moon, it's the peak energy. It illuminates the theme that we started at the beginning of the lunar cycle, which was what we were talking or thinking about for the new moon. So it's kind of now time to shed, let go of what is no longer needed. And kind of just move forward. But it is big energy.
Full moon's always big energy, isn't it?
I always can't sleep like 2 nights before the full moon.
Yeah. I used to work in a news agency when I was at uni, and I always knew when it was the full moon before I even looked at, Googling it or looking up in the sky, because people would just start acting strangely.
What would they do?
I don't know. It was just something, I think everyone was a bit heightened.
Yeah.
Everyone sort of felt like in a bit of a heightened emotional state. We had one a few people playing lotto would be a little bit more erratic when they were, so I just think it was that heightened state of the emotion coming through.
I think they say in hospitals, don't they, like the emergency centres of hospitals, like every full moon, it's, there's many more admissions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the word lunatic comes from Luna. The moon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, big one coming up.
The werewolves are out.
The wolves are out. You might see me out there.
Oh, yeah,
girls.
Exactly.
Guys, howling.
Actually, I love howling at the full moon.
You've said this to me before.
Yeah. So this full moon, let's do it together.
Okay. Sunday night.
It's actually very
let's
cathartic.
Do it. We'll do Is Adam away? Adam's away still. So, let's do that. Come around for a drink. We'll howl at the moon.
We'll howl at the moon.
Get our crystals out, charge them.
Exactly.
That's another thing you can do with the full moon.
Will we charge your cards? Do they go out with the full moon?
I've never done that before.
Okay.
Yeah. More about crystals. It kind of like cleanses them and just recharges them, their properties.
Very good.
I don't do it every full moon, but when I think about it.
Yeah. So riddle me this. So we're currently in Gemini, but the full moon's in Sagittarius. So how does that work? I don't really understand that. Or is that something that we need to pop in the show notes? Because whenever people...
So because the sun is in Gemini.
Oh, mic drop. Okay.
Mic drop. Yeah. So then the moon can be in a different sign.
Ah, okay.
Sometimes it might be that it aligns. So the new moon was in Taurus, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
And it was in Taurus season. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But typically when we're talking about Gemini season, it's where the sun is placed.
Wow.
I'm glad that came to me then. I was just like, thinking like, come on, Chloe, you know this, but I got there. Thank goodness for that. I just wanted to jump into and like kind of let everyone know some themes for the month of June coming into June. So we might feel a lot of like sensuality, divine feminine, and some themes around family might be coming up. So some nice little questions that we can pop in the show notes as well is to ask yourself, what does sensuality and femininity mean to you? And maybe drop into like, what are your personal truths about sensuality and femininity rather than what is society's thoughts on those two themes? And how much do you truly allow yourself to love and then to receive love? I think for us as females, sometimes we're ones to give love really easily and naturally, but then to receive love back can be a little bit harder for us.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of surrendering and vulnerability that's required to receive that love.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's so important for us to nourish ourselves and to receive that. And it allows us to step more into our feminine to receive. So I just thought, where can we soften, where can we surrender and lean into the joys of life? And some other things that you might want to think about doing for the month of June is like enjoying home-cooked meals, getting really cozy and connecting with loved ones.
Awesome. And we've also got the winter solstice coming up later in the month, don't we?
Yeah. That's usually around like the 24th or something,
21st.
21st.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into the meaning of that. We'll drop that in next couple of sessions.
Awesome. So
shall we do a
card reading? Yes.
Card pull for the week?
Card pull for the week.
I'm loving these, by the way. I'm kind of like, we do them and then they sit with me for a bit. I'm like, it's actually
they often make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so much sense. All right, I'm just giving these ones a shuffle. Steph, do you want to just tell
absolutely.
everyone what ones we're choosing today?
So we are using the Rebecca Campbell Work Your Light Oracle cards. I believe we've pulled from this deck before.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, so what we've got is share your voice. Come out of the cave. Persecution. Interesting. And expression. So I can have a little look here what that means, but share your voice. I guess that's speaking to us, isn't it? We're sharing our voice. But for the week ahead, how can you share more openly and honestly? I think it kind of feeds into our uncomfortable conversations, doesn't it?
Yeah. I love that these cards so often reflect the conversation that we've just had.
I know. It really just is so amazing. So, you are being called to share your voice, perhaps by speaking up in a relationship or through writing, speaking, singing, or some other form of creative expression. Wow. There's a whole heap of more things here to say, but maybe we can put that in the show notes just to give some more information. But I think it just speaks so true to, us being open, honest, true to ourselves, in alignment and sharing. Yeah,
and going back to that sharing, I mean, a few episodes after they've dropped, I have had a bit of a vulnerability hangover.
Oh, same.
Because I've just been like, I forgot I said that, or what's this going on, or,
Totally.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, sharing's not always easy.
No, it's not. But it does feel good.
Yeah, I do. I feel like I think you were talking about shedding things before.
Yeah.
With the full moon coming up.
Yeah.
And I feel like absolutely it's nice to sort of speak your truth and maybe shed light on a different perspective.
Absolutely. It's so exciting. Yeah. So this week we're jumping in to chat about a beautiful, I guess I'd maybe describe her as a multi-dimensional being. And what I mean by that is that she has, like 20 years under her belt around with yoga, massage, somatic myofascial release, Ayurveda, dived into some hypnosis and timeline therapy.
Yoga.
Said that. But just like there's so much that this human being comes with.
Yeah.
And both Steph and I have both seen this beautiful woman for varying work, but I would say both of us over the last few years, pretty much, having her support us through our journeys. So I'd love, Steph, to hear, how has this beautiful woman supported you through your grieving process?
Yeah. So this for me was one of the first things, or was the first things that I did in that really, really early stages of grief. So I don't think I've shared this on the podcast before, but I lost Arthur just after he was born. So we were with him for 36 hours, but had quite a full-on like emergency C-section under general anaesthetic. So my body was, obviously under distress just from what it had been through. But then there was also
Sorry.
Then there was also that shock of everything that had happened. And it was, early grief is, I said to Huey the other day, like sometimes I miss it in a way because it was just the two of us. We were just in that deep, dark hole together. And as you move forward, often, your grieving processes start to shift a little bit and change. And like the early grief is it's not comfortable. It's the most terrible thing ever, but it's very sort of you're very together, if that makes sense.
So you and Huey were really connected during that time.
Well, you're holding on to each other for dear life.
Absolutely.
Right? And then as you move through it, then your grief, the way you grieve and actively grieve can change quite a bit. And then, life
between
comes
the
back
two
into
of you,
it.
you're meaning? Yeah. So you kind of separate a bit in a sense to do your grieving separately.
Yeah, and men and women
alongside.
grieve quite differently as well. And people, like, if you and I were both grieving, we would be doing it differently. Everyone does it how they need to do it. But yes, it was very, very early stages of grief. We'd just gotten home from the hospital. We'd just gotten home from the hospital. We'd spent a week in the hospital, and then we just spent a week in Adelaide, just as a break before we came back home, because home really didn't look like home.
No.
We had all of the baby stuff ready to go, and it was pretty empty and gutting place to be. And I was like, I need a massage. I need something just to help my body. And at the same time, a friend of mine had found this this practitioner online and bought me a session with her. At the same time, someone else entirely differently had a session with her just recently and bought Hugh a session.
Wow, okay.
And then I'd contacted her directly as well. So I'd contacted her, and then two other distinct people from like distinctly different groups had also contacted her and said, I want you to come and see Hugh and Steph. So she was meant to be. She was meant to be there. She was meant to be in our lives. And she came to our house for the first session, and it was just so raw. It was really just, holding me. And I spoke to her about it. I've been seeing her, and she became a good friend, for it's been almost 2.5 years now. And it was really just, holding me. And I would just cry in a lot of the sessions. It was more around that myofascial release therapy, which I hadn't had before. But it was very much a healing experience. I called her my healer because I felt that when I saw her, and I was seeing her weekly, it would be like the thing that would get me through that week would be knowing that I could go because, to start with, it was at our house, and then it was at her her area.
The womb.
The womb, which was a confronting name to start with.
Absolutely.
And I don't think we referred to it as that for a while.
Fair enough.
But it was really, her intention was to get me into that deep state of relaxation so my body could naturally return to balance. So it was really just trying to slow everything down. It was a lot of that somatic system work. It was, we did cupping, we did relaxation massage, we did relax and release. We did a lot of breath work to start with. And what she said to me was, you know, right now it's scary to be in your body. And it was. It was so scary to be in my body. I hated my body. Like, how could my baby, you know, be so damaged, like be so, damaged isn't the right word, but there was a lack of oxygen at some point in time. They don't really know when, why or how. But likely, you know, that happened in utero and then he died because his organs were too damaged. Okay. So like how could I do that to my baby? How did I not know he was in trouble? How can I ever trust my body again and trust myself again? So it was so many different layers and everything was so raw. And even talking about it now, it's sort of hard to...
Steph, you are just a phenomenal human being.
I'm like, my heart
in awe
goes
of you.
Straight back into my throat. And it is, I haven't spoken about this for a while. So... yeah, it was, to start with, it was meditation to get me out of my body because my body wasn't a safe place to be. And every week we would sort of do a mixture of all of this stuff. And I think having someone like Kando who has got all of these different practices that she could tap into and all of the tools. It wasn't like I can never get a massage again. She's ruined me because because all of the things that she was doing were so many energetic things. It was mindfulness, it was massage, it was
and
holistic,
as you say, the
it was
healer.
Yeah, she said there was even like a bit of kinesiology, and I know that that's something we'll explore in the future. But yeah, the relax and release. And one thing that she would mention to me is that, you know, her intention was just to hold me. Just to hold me and let my body release. But also there's a lot of issues in your tissues. So when you have got trauma, shock, that deep loss that you've experienced, it is held and remembered by your physical body. And I read a book, you know, after that, which was called The Body Keeps Score. And a lot of it is around the body holds trauma. And we can do talk therapy, we can do all of that kind of stuff. But unless we actually, you know, address that our body as these atoms, as these cells has also got that trauma, and how do we release that? I mean, to me, this was the first step. And it was something that, you know, she felt safe, even if nothing else around us felt safe. And I remember it would have been about 6 months in, and like I think that's when sort of some of that initial shock wore off, that, you know, I don't have my baby, he's not coming back, it's my birthday, I'm turning another year older, and it was supposed to be my first, you know, birthday with my baby and all of this kind of stuff. And everything was so frightening. Like, it was winter, so it was July, and the wind was blowing outside, and I was like in this state of absolute anxiety because I was just so scared. Like it was, everything was so scary. The world was so scary. And that wind, well, what does that mean? That's a threat. Like everything was a threat. So to have her and just, it was that fight and flight. Yeah, I was
just thinking your nervous system.
I was stuck in flight and fright.
Yes.
There was no fight in me. And we did a lot of nervous system work, and, you know, the conversations we had as well were just so real. Like, she was a counsellor as well, just talking through how I felt. We looked a lot about that vibrational chart.
Yes, of emotions.
Yeah, of emotions, which we can have a look in the show notes, because like one of the lower emotions is that grief. You know, it's one of the lowest emotions.
The bottom of the triangle.
And so as we worked through, and then I started having anger, that's when she was like, well, it's anger's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's you're moving
it's
up
higher.
in that chart of the, it's still low, but it's higher than where you were. So yeah, we did a lot of energetics, also some vibrational medicines like bush flowers. So had the bush flower essence, which is, you know, 7 drops under the tongue. And on there was an intention, like to start with, it was just, you know, very, very simple stuff. And I've kept all of them actually. I should take a photo. Yeah.
I'd love to see. I'm sure everyone would like to see.
Because to start with, it was very much like just like you are okay, and then you'll be safe. And then as we were working through to the next pregnancy and all of that kind of stuff, then all of those messages changed. And I could feel those fundamental shifts as we worked through it. So I know I've just sort of been waffling on a little bit and not being entirely descriptive, because even thinking about that time, it is sort of quite muddly in my mind.
Oh, Steph, I think that you've beautifully articulated how this wonderful practitioner supported you and held space during this time.
Yeah, and she said to me, I knew that things would be okay for you. And she said that she was holding that belief that that love would see me through and all of that. So she was holding that belief for me when I couldn't hold that belief for myself.
And
I couldn't even think a few moments ahead.
No.
Which was actually useful, because I think mindfulness is something, especially during my second pregnancy, mindfulness and just staying in that moment is what got me through, because fear and anxiety live in the future.
That would have riddled you, I imagine, like being in your second pregnancy and just,
because everything had been fine. Like I had a really healthy pregnancy, everything was great until it wasn't, So it was incredibly, like saying it's incredibly difficult does it a disservice, because it was the hardest thing I've ever done, for sure. But this practitioner, does a lot of stuff also around the parasympathetic nervous system, which is around that fight or flight response. So I would say that she, was, holding the hand of Hugh and myself and getting us through this, and was probably, one of the most important people to us at that time. Just to go there, she was just, not trying to tell us anything, she was just there. And when we talk about sitting with that uncomfortableness, just holding that space for us.
And she was that person to be there with you in the discomfort, and she could hold that too, which is amazing.
Yeah, not trying to fix anything.
No.
A lot of people would be like, oh, well, like they couldn't. We're meaning makers. And when something like this happens, where it's a complete out of order death, people try to make meaning. Well, maybe it was meant to be. And it's like, well, no, it wasn't meant to be. Sometimes trauma is trauma, and sometimes bad things happen and there's no silver lining. And it was hard to interact with people, because they would say really unhelpful comments like, well, you can have another baby. And I was like, yeah, okay. If your son just died, do you think that's helpful, saying, well, you can have another baby? If your husband just died, well, you can get remarried. Like those kinds of comments are not helpful.
No.
You don't need to say anything. You can't. It goes back to entirely our conversation earlier.
Absolutely.
Like you can't solve this problem.
No.
There's no reason for this to happen. There's no, we don't need to make meaning out of it. Sometimes bad things just happen.
It is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, so sometimes tragedy is just tragedy, I suppose. But she was really great of just holding us, holding space, and working through our body and holding, just working on whatever needed to be working on. So I would say she was an angel. I think maybe Arthur sent us to her, because if you think about the way she came to be.
Absolutely, he did.
And even just some of the conversations, like I would be like, telling her, oh, I had, Arthur was here when we did that session. And she's like, oh my God, I felt that too. Like it was just such a beautiful connection.
Yeah.
And then from there, she was the gateway drug into all of these other different, the gateway bodywork into a lot of these other healing techniques.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to start that process, I guess, being held and supported by such a nurturing being. And that's what you needed in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was almost like, the picture I have in my head now is like I was the baby.
Yeah.
And she was
is such a mothering
and
soul.
She was cradling me in her arms and she was protecting me and holding me, and healing, starting that healing.
Starting the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with us. Gosh, I'm going to give you the biggest hug after this.
And isn't that funny? Like even now, like I laugh because that's a way of also like
moving through discomfort.
Because it is. Well, it's not discomfort. It just hurts. Like that heartache. You know, my heart still, and I think it always will. Like just is that physical pain.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Oh. I'm so grateful for you. Like, it's pretty amazing that you can sit here and share, you know, what you've been through, Steph. And
Thanks, Chloe. It's hard, and it's hard conversations.
Yeah, but important.
Yeah. So talk to me. What did you do?
As we kind
it's
of
so
said
hard
at
not
the
to say her
start,
name.
I know.
It's
such a beautiful name too.
And the reasons are just to as a quick sidebar. The reason we don't mention the practitioners' names is because we want to be able to, you know, tell you exactly how we're feeling, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So far, we haven't had any bad or ugly.
No, we haven't.
But it's sort of just a rule that we're wanting to hold.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean you can't contact us about and to seek further information.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to know who we're talking about, just slide on
Yeah.
into our DMs.
Absolutely.
On Instagram, which is the .selfish podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this beautiful being, I guess, has supported me through Bodywork as well. But I guess I wanted to speak to, she's gone through a little bit of a transformation herself and moved into more of the mentoring, coaching kind of space. And I have had the wonderful pleasure of sitting with her in that capacity. And so last year, I spent 4 months with her in a beautiful container called Alchemy. And in this we caught up weekly with a variety of Zoom sessions. And then we, once a month, we would do body work as well. But within the Zoom sessions, we would look at a variety of healing techniques. And they kind of looked at using neuro-linguistic programming techniques, some timeline therapy, or neural energetic encoding, it can be called as well.
I think we're going to have to get you to break down all three of those things.
I don't know if I'm going to do it justice by me talking about it, but I guess I can share my experiences of what we went through with kind of tapping into the subconscious mind, essentially it was. So, yeah, we were Zoom with some face-to-face sessions. She used bushflower essences as well at the end of the session. Like for the week ahead, we would, have the 7 drops, and that was a really beautiful way to end the session. But kind of, came into the session and it would be like, well, what's coming up for you, Chloe? You know, what do you need to talk about? And sometimes I wouldn't know what I needed to talk about, but you know, kind of similar to your psychotherapist, like it just kind of evolves. And then you might be, you know, one time we were talking about power. And she was like, what does power mean to you, Chloe? And I was like, oh, if I close down my eyes, like it kind of like took me back to a very like masculine kind of space, you know, like I was like, power to me is like a man standing over others and being quite greedy and using power in a really negative light. Yeah. And she kind of like reflected that back to me, and I was like, wow, that's really deep, because I was shying away from power because of that being my... Because
that was your belief system.
That was my belief around it, which is totally wild, because now we then did some I can't remember if we did timeline therapy with that. We may have. This timeline therapy is so warped and wild. Basically, you ask your so she would ask whether my subconscious was okay to go back. And with this one in particular, I think I went back like a few lifetimes, and went back to a room, like an old shed. It was like a wooden shed, and there was a lady kneeling down, crying with her head in her hands, beside a bed. So this was the power one. So that's what it took me back to. And I don't know how then I had these thoughts about males and whatever, but I guess in that moment, that woman was powerless to me. I don't know if it was me in a previous lifetime. I don't know who this woman was. But then you like kind of float back up over yourself and you kind of, then you come back to now and then you look back at that time and then you look forward and you change your thought process moving forward. And so then we kind of started to reestablish what power means to me. And so was talking about like powerful can be very feminine, it can be graceful, it can be, you know, used for good. And then I started to just reframe that and think like, wow, you know, like power is not a bad thing. So yeah, we kind of dive deep into many. I think you're right about limiting beliefs is what I worked through a lot of in that 4-month container.
And it's interesting with it, just talking on the power piece a little bit more.
Yeah.
I suppose a lot of those role models that we've seen of people in these power positions are males.
Absolutely.
And I've just been watching Succession.
I haven't watched this yet.
It's just,
is it good?
Well, it's amazing.
Okay.
Season finale was just a few days ago. I have not watched the finale yet, but I will be watching it. But a lot of that is about power.
Yeah.
And you know, most of the people in key positions of power are males. And it's that very sort of hierarchical, old school, boys club kind of piece. So no wonder that's where your mind goes to, because that's not just, you know, they're the things that we see, and it's important. If we don't see it, it's hard to, you know, believe it or know it's there or define it. Yeah. And even if it's that subconscious, and as you're talking about, it's going back into your subconscious that, you know. Yeah,
and retweaking that and kind of now, if I speak about power, I don't actually see that.
You've repositioned the narrative.
I've totally repositioned my narrative. Rewritten it. I have, you know, like I see the two of us as powerful women in a beautiful way, you know, like I don't have that really negative connotation.
We don't need to stomp our feet and yell at people.
No, to be powerful in a really graceful manner. So anyway, that was like a really beautiful experience. So yeah, for me, my experience with this practitioner was a lot about rewriting my narrative. And so power was a big one. And then also another one that came up was a limiting belief that I have held since I was around 7 years old around my ability to communicate, which is so fascinating. Last year I did a leadership program for 6 months and I was working with this practitioner at the same time, and it kind of came up just randomly that I hold this belief. Because I don't hold it anymore. I held this belief that my words shouldn't be heard, and I actually thought that I had a really high pitched voice and it was a really horrible sounding voice.
You've got a beautiful sounding voice.
Thanks.
I love listening to your voice.
I've now learned this about myself, but it's so wild, the things that we store. And so she helped me rewrite another narrative, which is pretty powerful. I don't think I would be sitting here in this chair if I had not been on that leadership course and been working with this practitioner last year to be able to, you know, focus on my throat chakra and open up and share so openly, and know that it's valid and it can be beneficial for me to use my voice. So,
and what did the card say?
Share your voice. Yeah.
One of the things I find interesting about that whole piece of sharing your voice, and I think just reflecting on what I just shared earlier, is sometimes I think, I need to cover absolutely everything, but this is really just conversations and asking every conversation. I'm never going to cover everything. We slowly unpack the peel back the layers of the onion, and we cover some things, we don't cover other things. Doesn't mean they're not important to us, doesn't mean they haven't happened. And for me, that's been hard about sharing my voice, because I thought, well, if I'm giving a voice to people in that lost community, I need to make sure I'm, you know, covering everything and doing this. And I'm not. I'm one person sharing a little crumb of my experience.
That's right.
That will just, so I think that's
evolve over time. Yeah.
I think that's interesting about that voice sharing. And I think the fact that, you held those beliefs, that I think it's amazing that you knew that was a limiting belief. around the communication piece. I think about so many people out there, and myself included, like, what are those other beliefs that are so deeply ingrained in us?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
how do we then shift that?
And how do we shift it? Yeah. And I think for me, the shifting was first recognizing, acknowledging it, and then which we had someone reach out about talking about inner child work, which I think we'll talk about in another episode. But it was very much about, we did the timeline therapy, and I actually went back to myself as that 7-year-old child and just gave her love in that moment, you know, and that to me is the closure on that, and that kind of being like, you know, now I'm an adult and I can rewrite my story. That doesn't have to be my story.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
That is power. Yeah. Amazing.
I just got to get teary on that. Yeah. So we can make the choice, can't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was such an amazing 4 months with this practitioner, and so much depth was uncovered, and as you say, the onion layers were starting to peel back, and I, by no means, we are all human and we have many onion layers to peel back. We're always forever learning, aren't we, on this journey and healing. But for me, they were two really major things that I kind of I guess overcame or just rewrote.
Yeah. Or even just started the process of working through, because that might be a continual thing that you need to reassess. And in some ways, yes. I actually feel like pretty or do you feel like it's...
I feel like it's done.
Chapter closed, yeah.
I feel like it's done, and I think for me being able to speak to it now so openly and candidly, I think that also, you know, shows that, you know, I have rewritten it essentially, and stepping into these, you know, more uncomfortable conversations that will be had many times over in my lifetime, you know, like just stepping into them with compassion and love and understanding for myself, but also the other person in that communication exchange. But yeah, just, and being okay with whatever feelings come up. And yeah, I think I have weirdly shifted it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You should be proud of yourself.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. And I think when we understand where we've come from and where we're going, and that we are in control if we go there. Yeah,
absolutely. And if we allow ourselves, I think there's the power in that too, isn't there? And courage to be able to go like...
Yeah, and to get there, you have to lose control, like
absolutely.
have relinquish control.
Totally.
You have to be vulnerable. You have to be uncomfortable.
And there's work to be done. You know, like you could recognize it, but then there's still work that you need to do in order to shed it, which is, an ongoing process. But I think I can sit here today and say that I have changed that trajectory for me, which is pretty cool.
That's very cool.
So, it was a super powerful 4 months for me. And
she is still doing this type of work. So a lot of the coaching work is around that alignment, but also holding that belief for people around what they can do. So she held that belief even in that earlier work with the bodywork.
Absolutely. And that's what she said actually when we were chatting to her, or when I called her up and just spoke about that we were going to chat about her. She said that what she does. She holds the belief that the good is there, I guess, you know, or the love, or, you know, all of those beautiful feelings and desires for one's life. She holds that for you, which is pretty special to have someone do that for you. So great.
It's a real gift to give.
Yeah, it was a really magical journey. Yeah. So, crazy. All right, shall we
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That was a big one.
We went deep today, didn't we? And that's what we said. We said we're going to be, you know, when we talked about this, we said we want to be raw, we want to be honest, we want to be deep.
Absolutely.
And we want to share. So, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Some really powerful stuff there.
I think lots of stuff for everyone to deliberate over. And, I think for us too, this will probably... there'll be some, thinking, I think, for us over these next few days, and just For me, though, too, like gratefulness for being able to share.
Yeah. And I think for me, just being able to give a voice to this experience, my experience, I find it, it's been really cathartic.
Great.
So as we now go back into our everyday lives and back into the reality of the world, I just want everyone to just spend a few moments just to ground ourselves back in reality. So just find a place. You might be standing, you might be sitting, you might be lying down, you might be driving. Just find a space and just sort of notice one thing that you can hear. Notice one thing that you can hear, in the space that you're in. And then I just want you to expand that consciousness out a little bit. So is there something that you can see a little bit further here, a little bit further? I then want you to think about something that you can see. Again, look close to where you are, what's something you can see, and then just expand that field of vision further on. Is it a tree in the distance or a leaf rustling in the wind? And then I want you to touch. So what's something that you can feel? Can you feel something in your body? Can you feel the steering wheel or the ground underneath your feet? And then I just want us to do a deep breath in and then a slow, longer breath out. And just one more time, count to 4 as we breathe in and count to 6 as we breathe out. Okay.
Oh, thank you for guiding us through that, Steph. That was beautiful.
Thanks, Chloe. And thank you, everyone, for listening to today's podcast. We really appreciate all of your feedback. We appreciate everyone who listens along. So please do rate, please share, let your friend know if you found this to be useful. Send a link to someone else. We've also got our Instagram, which is at the.selfishpodcast. You can send us a DM if there's something that you want us to explore or if you want more information about something. Please do get in touch. You can find us wherever you get your favourite podcasts. And in the meantime, we want you to all look after yourselves. We want you to be selfish, put yourself first.
And ground for this month. I think that's really important. Think about your sensuality, your femininity, and do things that bring you back to joy.
Yeah, and I think just try and be comfortable with
using your voice.
Comfortable with using your voice, and just be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, sit in it. Discomfort is not a bad thing.
Sit in the silence. Another thing, I know we're wrapping this up, but another thing I saw on YouTube was someone they were looking at how to increase resilience in the nervous system, and they would start with, like a lot of people do the cold water bathing. They said start with like a bowl of ice water and just put your hands in it.
Oh, good one.
And you can just start small. So if you can't get out into that cold ocean, there's something.
Put your feet in.
Or your hands.
Or your hands or your head. Whatever. All right, beautiful people. We'll see you next week. Lots of love.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.